7 beautiful widows pounded on Crag Bartleby's cabin door as lightning split the mountain sky. Thunder rolled through the peaks like cannon fire. Rain lashed against the logs he'd cut 3 winters past. Crag's hands found his rifle before his mind caught up. 3 years of solitude had sharpened his instincts to blade edges. The knocking came again, desperate, urgent. He hadn't seen another soul since the last snow melted. Through the small window, shapes moved in the storm. Black dresses, mourning clothes, women seeking shelter where no women should know to look. The wind howled through the pines. It carried voices with it, pleading voices. Crag's finger traced the rifle's trigger. Trust had died in him long ago, buried in a mine shaft with better men than himself. The door shuddered under their fists. He moved to the window. 7 faces looked back through the glass. Beautiful faces marked by grief and desperation. Water streamed from their hair. Their lips moved in words the storm swallowed. One stepped forward, red hair plastered to her skull, green eyes that held authority even in defeat. She pressed her palm against the glass. Her mouth formed a single word, please. Crag's chest tightened. He'd built this cabin to escape human need, human pain, human judgment. The mountains asked nothing of him but survival. These women asked for everything. Lightning illuminated their faces again, younger and older, different colors of skin and hair, all wearing the same black grief, all carrying bundles clutched against their chests like children. The redhead stepped back. She spoke to the others, pointed toward the tree line. Crag followed her gesture. More lights flickered between the trees, torches moving upward through the storm, following the women's trail. His blood turned to Winter Creek water. The women weren't just seeking shelter, they were running. The redhead returned to the window. This time her eyes found his through the glass. Recognition passed between them. She knew he was there, knew he was deciding their fate. Her lips moved again. This time he caught the words. We know who you are. Crag's rifle clattered to the floor. Impossible. He'd covered his tracks, changed his name, burned his past to ash and scattered it across 3 states. The woman's eyes held certainty, not accusation, not hatred, just knowledge that cut through his defenses. Thunder crashed overhead. The women huddled closer together. The youngest swayed on her feet, exhaustion and cold stealing her strength. Crag's hand found the door latch. Every instinct screamed against it. Opening that door meant opening his life to whatever storm these women carried. Whatever passed they dragged up the mountain with them. But the young one was falling. His humanity won. The door swung open. 7 women stumbled inside like leaves before a gale. They brought the storm with them, rain and wind and the scent of fear. Crag slammed the door shut, threw the heavy bar across it, turned to face what he'd let into his sanctuary. The redhead stood closest. Water dripped from her dress to his clean floor. Her green eyes studied his face with uncomfortable intensity. Behind her, the others arranged themselves in a rough semicircle, all different, all united by whatever brought them here. A Chinese woman with intelligent eyes, a young blonde barely out of girlhood, a dark-skinned woman with a performer's bearing, a sharp-faced brunette whose hands never left her coat pockets, an older woman with kind eyes that missed nothing, a Creole beauty whose stillness suggested hidden depths. 7 widows in his cabin, 7 strangers who claimed to know his secrets. The redhead spoke first. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command. Mr. Bartleby, we know who you really are, and we know what you did in Copper Falls. Crag's knees nearly buckled. Copper Falls. The name he'd spent 3 years trying to forget. The place where good men died and cowards ran. How? The word escaped before he could stop it. Our husbands died in the same mine, the same accident 6 months ago. The Chinese woman stepped forward. Her voice held pain wrapped in steel. It wasn't an accident. Crag's vision blurred. The mine. The explosion. The screams that still echoed in his dreams. The sharp-faced brunette moved to the window, peered through the glass at the approaching torches. They followed us here, found our trail despite the storm. The Creole woman spoke without looking at him. By morning we might all be dead. You too. Cragg sagged against the door. These women hadn't just found his hiding place. They'd led death straight to his doorstep. The young blonde swayed again. This time she fell. The older woman caught her, lowered her gently to a chair by the fire, began checking her pulse with practiced hands. She needs warmth, rest, safety. The redhead fixed Cragg with those green eyes again. We came here for answers, for justice, for the truth about what happened to our men. She paused. Let the weight of her words settle. We know you were there. We know you survived when they didn't. We know you've been hiding ever since. Cragg's throat closed. Every muscle in his body screamed to run, to grab his rifle and disappear into the storm. Leave these women to face whatever followed them. But the young one needed help. They all did. And deep in his chest something stirred. Something he'd thought dead and buried. The need to stand and fight instead of running away. The redhead watched the war play across his face. Her expression softened slightly. We're not here for revenge, Mr. Bartleby. We're here because you're the only one left who knows what really happened. The only one who can help us make it right. Outside, thunder crashed again. The torches grew closer. Cragg looked at each woman in turn, saw strength masked as vulnerability, purpose disguised as desperation. They'd found him, cornered him, offered him a choice between his carefully constructed isolation and something far more dangerous, a chance at redemption. He moved away from the door, began pulling furniture against the windows, preparing for siege. His voice, unused for months, came out rough as mountain stone. What are your names? The redhead almost smiled. I'm Lavinia Cole. These are my sisters in grief. She began the introductions, each name another weight on his conscience, another soul he'd failed to save, but they were here now, alive, fighting. Maybe it wasn't too late after all. They worked in silence as the storm raged. 7 pairs of hands moving with purpose through Cragg's carefully ordered world. Lavinia Cole directed the others with subtle gestures, a saloon owner's instincts for managing chaos. Her red hair caught firelight as she surveyed the cabin's defenses. Maudie Otis positioned herself at the eastern window. Her sharp eyes tracked the torches moving upward through the trees. Her hands never left her coat pockets where steel waited. Rachel O'Hannon spread papers across Cragg's table, mining company documents, legal forms, evidence gathered over months of careful investigation. The Chinese woman introduced herself as Edwina Ling. She examined the cabin's construction with an engineer's eye, tested the strength of walls her husband might have built. Young Marigold Southwick had recovered enough to help barricade the door. Her blonde hair hung loose around shoulders that trembled from more than cold. Ida made it move through the space, studying each person's face, reading tells and secrets. Her dark skin gleamed with firelight and intelligence. Naomi Boudreaux tended the injured girl while watching Cragg. Her Creole features remained impassive, but her eyes missed nothing. Cragg hauled furniture against windows. His hands shook slightly. 3 years of isolation hadn't prepared him for this much humanity in one space. Lavinia approached him as he worked, stood close enough that her presence demanded attention. Tell us about the mine. The words hit him harder than winter wind. He kept moving furniture, kept his hands busy so they wouldn't shake worse. Your husbands were good men. That's not what we asked. Cragg's shoulders tightened. Outside, thunder rolled across the peaks. The storm was settling in for a long siege. They found something, something that got them killed. Rachel looked up from her papers. Her teacher's voice cut through the cabin's tension. Gold. Thousands of dollars meant for workers' families. Diverted to company accounts. Edwina's hands stilled on the wall she'd been examining. My husband designed the safety systems, said they were being bypassed. Corners cut to save money. Maudie spoke without turning from her window. Mine foreman complained about unsafe conditions. Management told him to keep quiet or find new work. One by one, they shared pieces of the puzzle. Each husband had discovered a different fragment of the conspiracy. Accountant noticed missing funds. Safety inspector found tampered equipment. Engineer saw his designs ignored, all of them asking questions, all of them getting too close to the truth. Crag sank into a chair by the fire. The weight of their words pressed down on him heavier than mountain stone. Naomi moved closer, her healer's instincts drawn to his pain. You were there when it happened. Not a question. A statement of fact. Crag nodded once. The motion felt like surrendering. I set the charges. The cabin fell silent except for wind and rain. 7 women waited for him to continue. Company orders. Controlled demolition to clear a new shaft. Standard procedure. His voice cracked on the last words, except it wasn't standard. The placement was wrong. The timing was wrong. Everything was wrong. Lavinia knelt beside his chair. Her green eyes held no judgment, only patience. What did you do? I tried to warn them, tried to delay the blast, but I was too late, too scared, too much of a coward. Marigold's young voice carried surprising strength. You lived, that means something. Crag shook his head. Guilt carved deeper grooves in his weathered face. I ran, left them buried while I saved my own skin. Naomi reached for his hands, turned them palm up in the firelight. Old scars traced his fingers, burns from handling explosives. These aren't a coward's hands. She traced the healed wounds with gentle fingers. These are the hands of someone who tried. Edwina left her position by the wall, joined the circle forming around Crag's chair. My husband's last letter mentioned you, said there was one honest man left in the company, one person who might help expose the truth. Rachel gathered her papers, brought them closer to the fire. We didn't come here seeking revenge. We came seeking the only witness who could tell us what really happened. Ida's performer's voice carried to every corner of the cabin. 7 women can't bring down a mining company alone, but 7 women and one man who knows where the bodies are buried might have a chance. The torches outside had stopped moving, positioned in a rough circle around the cabin, waiting for dawn. Lavinia stood, moved to the window where Maudie kept watch. How many? A dozen, maybe more. They're not going anywhere. Crag rose from his chair, moved to his weapon cabinet, pulled out ammunition and spare rifles. Jeremiah Blackstone doesn't leave witnesses. The women exchanged glances. Some communication passed between them that excluded him. Lavinia spoke for the group. We know about Blackstone. We know what he's capable of. That's why we prepared. Rachel spread more documents on the table, bank records, correspondence, testimony from other miners' families. We've been gathering evidence for months, building a case that even territorial courts can't ignore. Naomi opened her bundle for the first time. Inside were glass vials filled with samples, soil, water, metal fragments, chemical analysis of the explosion site, proof the charges were placed to maximize casualties. Each woman revealed pieces they'd kept hidden, evidence gathered, witnesses contacted, legal groundwork laid. They hadn't come to his mountain seeking help. They'd come to offer partnership. Marigold's voice carried a steel that belied her youth. We can't bring our husbands back, but we can make sure their deaths meant something. Outside, the storm began to weaken. Wind shifted from howling to whispers. Rain gentled to steady drops. Dawn was coming. With it would come Blackstone and his men. Crag loaded his rifle with steady hands. 3 years of guilt and isolation burning away like morning mist. What do you need me to do? Lavinia smiled for the first time since entering his cabin. It transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. Help us finish what our husbands started. The torches outside began moving again, tightening their circle, preparing for the final confrontation. Crag checked his weapons one last time, looked at each woman in turn, saw courage disguised as desperation, strength masked as vulnerability. For 3 years he'd hidden from the world, hidden from justice, hidden from the truth about who he really was. These 7 widows had climbed a mountain in a storm to remind him. He moved to the window beside Maudie, watched the lights creep closer through the trees. His voice carried newfound certainty. Then let's give them a fight they'll remember. The cabin settled into waiting silence. 7 women and 1 man preparing to face the dawn. Outside, Blackstone's men completed their circle. Inside, justice sharpened its claws. Dawn broke gray and cold over the mountain. The storm had passed but left the world washed clean and sharp. Mist rose from wet pine needles. Crag counted shadows through his window. 15 men positioned around the cabin, professional killers masquerading as miners. The women moved through final preparations with quiet efficiency. Each had slept in shifts. Each knew her role and what was coming. Rachel gathered her documents into careful stacks, legal papers that could topple an empire if they reached the right hands. Her teacher's precision showed in every fold and crease. Edwina checked the mechanical contraptions she'd assembled during the night. Springs and pulleys fashioned from cabin materials. An engineer's mind adapted to wilderness tools. Naomi arranged her vials of evidence on the mantelpiece. Chemical proof that would speak louder than testimony. Science wielded against corruption. Ida positioned herself where morning light would catch her face, a performer preparing for the role of her lifetime. Truth disguised as theater. Maudie remained at her window post, rifle cleaned and loaded. Her sharp eyes tracked every movement outside. A predator watching prey. Young Marigold sat by the fire clutching a leather portfolio. Her hands trembled, but her jaw was set. Youth facing down age and treachery. Lavinia stood in the cabin's center, orchestrating the others with silent gestures. A conductor preparing her orchestra for the final movement. Footsteps approached through wet leaves. Heavy boots crushing undergrowth. The sound of men who no longer cared about stealth. A voice called from outside, cultured, educated, deadly. "Good morning. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Jeremiah Blackstone emerged from the tree line, tall and distinguished with silver hair and expensive clothes. He carried authority wrapped in civilized manners. Behind him came his hired guns, hard men with harder eyes. They spread in a loose semicircle facing the cabin. Crag moved to the door but didn't open it. His voice carried through the wood. "Nothing here belongs to you." Blackstone's laugh held no warmth. The sound of winter wind through bare branches. "Mr. Bartleby, still playing the hermit after all these years. How refreshing to find you've made new friends." His tone shifted, became practical, business-focused. "These ladies have taken documents from my office. Evidence of proprietary mining techniques. I'm here to reclaim company property." Lavinia stepped beside Crag. Her voice cut through the morning air. "Your husbands were thieves, industrial spies. Their deaths were unfortunate but necessary." Rage flowed through the cabin. 7 women facing the man who'd murdered their families, but discipline held. The plan remained intact. Marigold rose from her chair, moved toward the door with careful steps. Her young voice carried across the clearing, "I want to make a deal." The words hit the cabin's interior harder than gunfire. Every woman turned to stare. Crag's hand found his rifle. Blackstone's interest sharpened. "How sensible. What did you have in mind?" Marigold's fingers worked the door latch. Her shoulders shook with apparent fear. "Money. Enough to start over somewhere else. Forget what we learned. Forget what happened to our husbands." Lavinia's green eyes blazed, but she remained silent, trust warring with protective instinct. The door opened. Marigold stepped into morning light clutching her portfolio. Sunlight caught her blonde hair and pale skin. She looked fragile as spun glass. Blackstone studied her with predator's eyes, saw youth, saw weakness, saw opportunity. "What evidence do you possess?" Marigold's voice wavered convincingly. "My husband kept books, records of gold shipments, money that went missing." She held up the leather case. "It's all here, everything you need to disappear." Blackstone gestured to his men. They shifted position, created a corridor between him and the girl. "Show me." Marigold walked forward on unsteady legs. Each step carried her further from the cabin's protection, closer to armed killers who'd murdered better people for less. She stopped halfway between safety and danger, opened the portfolio with trembling hands, papers scattered in the morning breeze, documents covered with numbers and signatures, evidence that looked damning in the early light. Blackstone moved closer. His educated eyes scanned the scattered sheets. His expression shifted from suspicion to satisfaction. These are excellent forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. Marigold's facade cracked. Fear replaced performance. What? The real books burned months ago, along with your husband and his interfering friends. Blackstone's civilized mask slipped, revealed the killer beneath. Did you really think a child could outmaneuver me? He raised his hand, signaled his men to advance. The cabin door exploded open. Cragg emerged with rifle raised. Behind him came 6 women armed with purpose and desperate courage. But Marigold wasn't finished. Her trembling hands reached into the portfolio's inner pocket, drew out a different set of documents, papers that caught morning light and revealed company letterheads. She'd switched the evidence, fed Blackstone forgeries while keeping the real documents safe. Her young voice carried new strength. These are the real books, and they're not forgeries. Blackstone's face went white. He lunged forward, but Marigold was already moving, racing back toward the cabin and safety. Gunfire erupted across the clearing. Bullets shattered wood and glass. The morning's peace dissolved in smoke and violence. But the women were ready. Edwina's contraptions triggered from inside the cabin. Ropes and pulleys activated by careful engineering. Trees fell across escape routes, blocked retreat paths. Ida's voice rose above the chaos, a performer projecting to the furthest balcony. Her words carried across the mountainside. Murder, theft, conspiracy. The territorial marshal needs to hear this. As if summoned by her voice, riders appeared on the ridge above. Badge metal gleamed in morning light. Law enforcement arriving at the perfect moment, not by chance, by careful planning. Lavinia had sent word before the storm, used her connections to bring justice to the mountain. The siege had been a trap within a trap. Blackstone realized his situation, surrounded by evidence and witnesses, caught between the law and the consequences of his actions. His cultured voice turned savage. Kill them all. But his men were already laying down weapons. Professional killers facing professional lawmen. The odds had shifted beyond redemption. Cragg stepped forward, rifle steady in weathered hands. His voice carried 3 years of pent-up guilt and newfound purpose. Jeremiah Blackstone, you're under arrest for the murders of 7 good men. The mining company executive looked around the clearing, saw his empire crumbling, his carefully constructed lies exposed to mountain air and morning light. 7 widows stood behind Cragg, evidence clutched in their hands, justice written across their faces. The territorial marshal rode into the clearing. His badge caught sunlight and threw it back purified. Mr. Blackstone, you need to come with us. The man who'd ordered death from boardroom comfort found himself surrounded by consequences. His expensive clothes couldn't protect him from the truth. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The sound echoed across the mountain clearing. Justice had climbed to the high places, found its voice in the testimony of widows and the conscience of one honest man. The siege was over. The reckoning had begun. The territorial marshal's testimony echoed through the courtroom 6 weeks later. Each word hammered another nail in Blackstone Mining Company's coffin. Cragg sat in the witness box with hands folded. 3 years of isolation had prepared him for this moment, speaking truth to power, facing the consequences of conscience. His voice carried across the packed courtroom, steady as mountain stone. I placed the charges where Jeremiah Blackstone ordered, placement designed to kill, not to mine. The prosecutor held up diagrams drawn by Edwina's steady hand. Engineering precision applied to murder, science revealing malice. 7 widows occupied the front row, black dresses replaced with colors that caught afternoon light streaming through courthouse windows. Mourning transformed to hope. Lavinia's green eyes never left Cragg's face, encouragement flowing between them without words, the silent language of shared burden and mutual respect. The defense attorney tried attacking Cragg's credibility. 3 years of hermit living, possible mental instability, the desperate lies of guilty men. Naomi's chemical evidence destroyed those arguments. Soil samples that couldn't lie, water tests that revealed truth buried in mountain earth. Rachel's documentation painted the full picture: paper trails leading from murdered miners to stolen gold, corruption mapped in ledger entries and forged signatures. Ida testified with an actress's perfect timing. Her dark skin gleamed with righteous anger as she described her husband's final fears, his growing certainty that safety inspections were being ignored. Maudie's sharp voice cut through legal rhetoric. Mine foreman's widow who understood explosives and excavation, technical testimony that left no room for doubt. Young Marigold faced down Blackstone's lawyers with surprising steel. Her husband's accounting records spread across evidence tables, numbers that told stories of theft and murder. Edwina's engineering expertise sealed the case, diagrams showing how safety systems were bypassed, how her husband's designs were perverted into instruments of death. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on 7 counts of murder, guilty of theft, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of corrupting the territorial mining system. Jeremiah Blackstone stood for sentencing with his silver hair perfectly combed, civilization's veneer maintained even as his empire crumbled. 20 years hard labor. The Blackstone Mining Company dissolved. All assets seized to compensate victims' families. Justice served in a territorial courtroom, but paid for on a mountain in a storm. The widows emerged into territorial sunlight as free women, vindicated wives carrying their husband's memory forward into whatever came next. Cragg waited on the courthouse steps, his testimony complete, his conscience finally clear after 3 years of mountain solitude and self-imposed exile. Lavinia approached first. Her red hair caught afternoon light and turned it to fire. "What will you do now?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility, weighted with the shared understanding of two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of tragedy. Return to the mountain, but not alone. The other women gathered around them, a circle of survivors who'd climbed through storm and siege to reach this moment of quiet triumph. Rachel had been offered a teaching position in the territorial capital, her organizational skills and legal mind valued by progressive educators. Edwina planned to establish an engineering consultancy, the first Chinese woman to hang such a shingle in the territory, breaking barriers built by prejudice and tradition. Ida received invitations from theater companies in 3 states. Her courtroom performance had revealed dramatic gifts that transcended racial boundaries. Maudie intended to start a guide service, her knowledge of mountains and firearms attracting wealthy hunters from back east. Naomi would open an apothecary, her chemical expertise and healing knowledge serving communities long neglected by trained physicians. Young Marigold surprised everyone. She wanted to study law, use her experience to protect other families from corporate predators, each woman choosing her own path forward, each carrying strength discovered through shared struggle. But 3 remained uncommitted to distant futures. Lavinia stood closest to Cragg, her saloon owner's instincts reading the question in his weathered face. The mountain gets lonely, not if it's shared with the right people. Naomi and Marigold exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them and Lavinia. 6 months later, riders approaching Cragg's cabin would find it transformed, expanded, alive with purpose and human voices. The Widow's Rest had become more than shelter. It served as way station for travelers, base camp for the territory's first ethical mining cooperative, home to 3 women and 1 man who'd learned that isolation couldn't heal wounds only connection could touch. Lavinia managed the business with the same efficiency she'd once applied to running a saloon, her authority unchallenged, her partnership with Cragg built on mutual respect and shared history. Naomi tended travelers' ailments and injuries, her healing knowledge and gentle manner drawing people from throughout the territory. The cabin's shelves lined with remedies and chemical equipment. Marigold studied law books by firelight, preparing for territorial examinations while helping manage the cooperative's books. Her youth balanced by hard-won wisdom about human nature and corporate greed. Cragg no longer lived alone on his mountain, but he'd gained more than company. He'd found family among strangers, purpose among the displaced, love growing slowly in soil watered by shared tears and mutual trust. The mining cooperative they established became a model for the territory, miners owning shares in their labor, safety protocols designed by Edwina's engineering principles, profits shared rather than stolen. 7 husbands had died exposing corruption. Their widows ensured those deaths built something lasting, something clean. On quiet evenings, when mountain winds whispered through expanded cabin walls, 4 survivors would sit by firelight and remember, not dwelling in past grief, but honoring the path that brought them together. The storm that drove 7 desperate women to a hermit's door had passed, but it left behind something stronger than what the wind had torn away. A family forged by choice rather than blood, a business built on conscience rather than greed, a love story written in the aftermath of tragedy and the promise of shared tomorrows. The mountain man who'd lived alone for years had learned that some kinds of solitude were prisons, and some kinds of company were keys. 7 beautiful widows had asked to stay the night. 3 had chosen to stay forever. The mountains still rose around them, still offered shelter from the world's storms, but now those peaks sheltered something more precious than one man's guilty isolation. They protected a family, a future, a proof that sometimes the best homes are built by people who have learned the true cost of loneliness. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.